artistic from a designing to make sense.
You guys are still out? Okay. Okay. Go up to Chester. There's some really long power cables on the floor. If you go in, they're kind of almost like they're. You'll see them. They're red, orange. I don't know. They have marked them in what link they are.
Presentation, talk about it a little more. For after the speech too, if anybody's interested, I might have to put them back together a little bit, but I did create a 3D typeface out of Legos, and I have a couple of examples in that bag over there, which the plastic bag unfortunately hasn't kept them in one piece. Luckily it's a quick fix though, and perhaps I...
Yeah. The mic should work, but apparently there's no amplification. Those projectors also can get so I'm recording you.
Well, that's good. I appreciate that.
Next we're gonna run out of time. You just want to keep going and try to.
Yeah, unfortunately, I really can't show anybody how to make a font without the.
It really loses its impact at that point.
It does. It really does. Yeah.
Like a marker? Okay, but I think he's going to use a program.
I mean, I suppose there's part of it I could...
Telecommunications and internet, and I'll get right back to the network neutrality. We're going to be screwed here in roughly about 60 days. If SBC gets a hold of Bell South, and we're supposed to know something within the next 60 days,
Power strip.
Tripping power strip.
Totally, but that power strip tripped, and I had to reset it.
It's tripping, man. Lots of tripping.
Sorry, I was a bit late.
Oh, well, that perfect.
What do you do with fonts for a living?
Oh, well, I'm actually a graphic design student, but I've had a lot of interesting projects lately in design class, and one of them involves sort of creating your own fonts. Even though there is a million different fonts to choose from out there, sometimes you just want something a little bit more personal.
You don't want to pay $200 for it?
Yeah, that's another thing. You can only find so many free and useful fonts on the internet. Some of them do cost money.
Do you see, like, I should mention about the cost of some fonts.
Yeah.
Do people ever just, like, make their own, like, takes and just call it a day? I mean, why would you?
Yeah. You know, it depends. A lot of times, you know, just I guess that's what you're, you know, where you're working at, or what you're designing. Because, you know, I mean, a lot of the regular commercial fonts, like all the fonts that you find preloaded into any Adobe, you know, or page layout program, those are a lot of times the fonts that are used the most anyway, basic serif and sans serif fonts. So it works out well. A lot of times people, I guess, if you're not too inclined to find a font that's a little bit different, you might just take the default anyway. So that's probably why those ones are used the most. But all right, we're back up. All right. Yes. All right. So the next way that typeface is usually, you know, switched up a little bit to make it three-dimensional. It's a technique called sewing. Stroke of letter is interpreted as if it was like a strand of a ribbon. Twisted and folded letter forms suggest dimensional typography, just the way the you know, ribbon type's texture goes. I'll show some examples here. This might be a little hard to see for some people, but these are letter forms created. They have all kinds of floral patterns and things around them. And the way the floral patterns are drawn can suggest dimensionality to it. Here's an example of a, sort of a, ribbon font. The way the ribbon sort of folds in under and over itself suggests dimensional typography. Bloating is the last technique I'm going to talk about to sort of create a 3D letter form. And it's something I'm sure some of you have seen before. It's sort of like a balloon-like quality, where it looks like the letter form has, been blown up with air in it, sort of like a balloon. Other words, all kinds of bulbous, organic, inflated, biomorphic. Those are just other words that you can use. The one on the left, that word, it's used some kind of liquid, but as you can see, it's sort of the shadows of the light sort of suggest dimensionality. My lovely drawings on the right there, they are sort of, I'm talking about the sort of the balloon effect, different shadows and whatnot sort of creates an illusion of three-dimensionality. Shadows, but not the same kind of shadows I'm talking about, the drop shadow thing. That's a little bit different. 3D typography, this is sort of the last thing, I believe, other than examples, then I can actually show some techniques for creating your own typeface. 3D typography, these are some of the issues that need to be addressed with it. What role does it play on the printed page? Does it even belong on the printed page? That's a good question. It's one that is really difficult to answer. If it works for some sort of printed piece you're doing, then I guess so, but a lot of the times it's sort of, people would be hesitant to use a three-dimensional typeface in a, on a flyer or a poster or something like that. What is 3D typography's impact on language? How does the typography work as a system of letters that form words? I mean, is it readable? Is it legible? That's the next thing. Last thing is, does a 3D typographic object, does it even need to be a letter form? Can it just be some sort of interesting shape, something abstract? Does it have to be something that has to be used to spell out a word? Here's an example, sort of a 3D typeface. This one it's not very 3D, it's somewhat 3D, but it's used out of old tools and old pieces of different fabric. That's sort of another example. You can see the J, K, and the L. I think there's an R down at the bottom there. The one on the left, I think, was computer generated, and that's sort of another way to go. 3D modeling programs, you can create, whatever you want with those, and you can create your own, typefaces and whatnot. The one on the right, that's sort of, I'm not sure what that's made out of exactly, but it's sort of an example of the extrusion technique I was talking about earlier. This is my typeface, my 3D typeface, made out of Legos. It was an obvious choice for me because I have so many Legos at home, and I hadn't had any use for them in a long time. The B and the N, just not only was the way that I built the letters themselves, but again, the idea of, being a 3D typeface, you have to sort of walk around it and take it in from different views, and that's where, shooting it with the camera, as I had to for class, that's where it gets really tricky. Now I went to the camera, or the intro to photography thing last night because my pictures need a lot of work. So that's sort of a way you can, with a 3D typeface, you can take, a million different pictures and it can look different, different ways. The one on the left's a J, the one on the right is an O, and the O sort of, I think, shows a good example of how you can sort of look through it and you can still see part of it in the back there, part of the actual letter form. With Legos, there's a lot of different kinds of pieces, movable pieces you can use to create different angles and stuff, which makes it, I think, ideal for creating a 3D typeface. An S and a T, and I'm just saying what they are because, the question, again, with 3D typography, people are going to have a hard time sometimes realizing what it is, and that's sort of the challenge. And then again, if no one could recognize that as an S or T, would it actually be a letter form to them, or would it just be some sort of abstract objects? This is a three-dimensional typeface that a girl in my class made with little cubes and fish and the little flower stuff that you put in there for the fish. And what's cool about this is the fish swimming around in there. I mean, not only is the way you look at it different, but the fish swimming around there sort of move the letter forms themselves, so the letter forms could look different if you come back later on in the day. would have been cool to have a couple of those here to show you, but someone killed all her fish. So unfortunately, I can't show it. All right, let's see. All right, that is. I'll come back to that. All right, to actually get to some techniques now, which would be nice to show people. Let's see if they're actually. Yeah, I got to get used to this bigger screen. Let's see. I'm gonna close this window up for just a quick sec here. So let's see if my files might have closed. All right, let's just open these individually. Okay. As long as it's showing it, get used to the 640 by 480 resolution. All right, so here's one way to go about it. This might, this way sort of reminds me of Mario Paint, the video game for the Super Nintendo. It had an option. You could create different characters and stuff by filling in different squares to create different characters and whatnot. Well, you can do the same thing with letter forms, actually. So, all of these, everything about this grid right here, you can manipulate, you can fill in the little boxes, and you can create boxes of all different sizes if you want to really get, interesting, letter forms and whatnot. I just created these rather big boxes just to show the effect, but these right here, I mean, if you wanted to switch up, like, make an H and you didn't want the little slab serif things here, all you have to do. And, I wish if I had the time I'd go over some of these tools, and this is Adobe Illustrator, and it's a great program for creating this type of thing. But all they are just little squares in a grid, and you fill the square in and whatnot and create a completely different H. If you wanted to create a different letter form, you can always just unfill out the squares, like so. Actually, I could do more than one at a time here. Forgot about that. At least I should be able to. Make sure I'm pressing the right button. There we go. And you can get really interesting letter forms. You can create some letter forms pretty easy, actually, using this technique. So, the E becomes a C and whatnot. So, this is just one method. It's a method I think is, again, fairly easy, fairly quick. And you can get some pretty interesting letter forms. The A down here sort of reminds me of some sort of creature from Space Invaders or something like that. But again, you can get pretty creative using that technique. Here's a technique I'm going to show that's pretty easy for just creating different interesting textures. There's a brush tool in Illustrator, as there is in other programs like Illustrator. And Illustrator and Photoshop each come with a bunch of preset brushes. You can obviously download more brushes off the internet, but the brushes that are available are pretty cool, I think. I just need to find whether they're highlighted or not. Here we go. Maybe I can find a cool one here. And this is a way, like, all right, so I'm creating an S there, and that's a crappy looking S, but the brush itself is neat. So then, you have something that, has, I guess, a little bit of dimensionality to it, and something that's a little different than maybe what you thought it was going to be. I can create a couple more here. Again, a crappy W becomes something more interesting with the brush technique itself. I'm not actually spelling anything, but let's see. So I mean, that's something cool. I can try a different brush here, I suppose. Let's see what I get with a different brush. So create an H. So that's a little hard to tell, but that it's an H. But that's sort of the idea. As you can create stuff pretty easily that way. Here it is. Okay, I already showed those two. Let's see what else I got here. All right. Another way to create your own font is to take an existing font or existing typeface that already exists